Well, you mentioned that you're a journalist, and so as a result, you've covered a lot and lived through a lot historically, both in America and around the world. And so I'd like to ask you, you mentioned, Donald Trump. There's this sense that there is an unraveling sort of taking place, or maybe better phrased as sort of a battle for the soul of America here. And you have these right sort of reactionary, idiotic forces and racist forces. And then you have sort of, the movements, the democratic movement sort of rising up on the left. How does this moment, this sort of ideological crucible that we seem to be living through right now, how does it compare to, say, the radical movement in the 60s, or, even going back into the 30s during the Great Depression and the resistance movements that happened then? Is it on par? Is it more significant, less significant? What is your sense?
Well, first of all, I'm only 79, so I was born in 36.
But you're a student of history.
It's not as sharp as it should be, but I can tell you my father lost his job in 1936, the day I was born, and he didn't get it back until the war started. So, I was raised on a form of welfare and all that. Mm-hmm. And my parents, weren't even married, so we had two families to worry about and all that kind of stuff. But, I don't believe in any of the good old days, and I don't believe the current time is so horrible. I really don't. You mentioned Trump, but Trump's a joke. And the only reason he's not treated as a dangerous joke, by the way, he's a proto-fascist. Mm-hmm. Well, his message is one of fascism. It's racist, regards immigrants. It's vicious. It defends, the exploitation of people, the amassing of huge fortunes by irresponsible people. He's a dangerous demagogue. And the question really is to ask, why do people on these television networks and in the Republican Party indulge him? But I won't go along with what you imply as a left-right dispute or a Democratic-Republican one. For instance, last night I was at the Los Angeles Press Club where Truth Dig won an award for an article by Chris Hedges, but at the same time Reason magazine, which is a libertarian publication, won an award by its editor, Matt Welsh, who I've known for years, and he wrote an interesting article critiquing the left, and it was a good article, and he's a good journalist. I happen to think Rand Paul should not be demonized, just because he's a Republican. I think Rand Paul, just as his father had, plays a very good role in criticizing the role of the Fed and crony capitalism. I think Rand Paul did the nation a great service in standing up against the surveillance state and demanding the sunsetting the death of the Patriot Act. That took a lot of courage. That was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. That was Jimmy Stewart standing up there in the Senate, taking on John McCain, taking on all the hot shots, playing the Patriot. What George Washington warned us about in his farewell address, beware the impostures of pretended patriotism. They were all saying, oh, Rand Paul, the country's going to blow up, the terrorists are going to be here tomorrow, everything, and he didn't fall for it. Mm-hmm. He stuck to his guns. He said, you guys act like you want terrorism. He said, what are you frightening everybody so much for? And he won. He won. It was one of the great political victories, and the drama was incredible. So I think we have some, not all of them, but we have some libertarians out there on the Republican side that might have some sense about things. And I won't give the Democrats a blank check. Dianne Feinstein was supposed to be head of the committee that oversees the intelligence agency. She failed miserably until the evidence about torture became so clear that she at least had to go along with getting a report declared after it turned out that CIA was eavesdropping on our own staff, But generally, the Democrats have not been terrific on war, peace questions, on civil liberties, surveillance issues, and so I think there's room for development in the country, but I don't believe in any of the good old days stuff. I think some of the economic issues were clear as you had a vibrant trade union movement. And I see signs of that coming back, particularly around the living wage. and around immigrant workers. Organizing labor has become quite progressive. Back in the 60s, much of the labor movement was quite reactionary, very pro-war, wanted the jobs that war production creates. George Meany was no bargain. So if your question is this the worst of times? Hardly. And not only that, you know what the big issue for this country is, if you ask me that question?
Mm-hmm.
Can I answer that?
Oh, yes, please, yeah.
I don't want to take too much of your time here, but
no, please go ahead.
The big issue is, can we be an ordinary country? The most dangerous notion that developed here was that America is so... I think, what the founders had in mind was, yes, we were going to be a great experiment in individual freedom, again, with all the caveats that are really important, that we had slavery and we oppressed people and we oppressed women and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to minimize that in any way, It's a terrible legacy that we have not dealt with properly, obviously. But that ideal of representative government, at least for white males, the idea of limiting power really was based on the notion, don't try to be Rome, Spain, England, don't try to conquer the world. Don't try to have everybody's problems solved or everything. The founders did not have that notion of, we're supposed to set the whole world straight. We're supposed to be more like, a Greek city-state. We're supposed to figure stuff out on a local level. We're supposed to, decide, should the road go that way or this way? Should the water be pumped over there? And people would have knowledge, and then we'd have a free press of the town crier and the penny press. It wasn't a monopoly press, wall posters and political issues that you could comprehend because you weren't going off to fight in foreign lands. After all, our founders, almost to a person, warned us about foreign entanglements, warned us about being modest. Please, I beg anyone listening to this, go read George Washington's farewell address. Then read Dwight Eisenhower's farewell address. Mm-hmm. You got two generals turned president who and benefit from the wisdom of their 8 years in office each to tell us, be gentle. Two generals, be modest. Push nothing, Washington said. Force nothing. Gentle means, and so the lesson we have to learn now, as we are not going to be the center of the whole world. Other people can figure out how to do stuff. There are going to be plenty of engineers in India, China, Brazil, everywhere else. There are going to be plenty good products produced elsewhere. This does not mean the end of America. It just means we have to adjust to being a more ordinary country. And we don't need to spend an amount on the military equal to what the rest of the world spends. That's crazy. It's nuts.
Right.
And then we keep making problems for ourselves. If there's one thing, just think, we are now, we had the end of the Cold War. Even, a former Maine inhabitant, the first President Bush, mm-hmm. I remember, he was very big. The Cold War is over, and we're going to have a 1/3 cut in the military. Even Rumsfeld bought that. Even Dick Cheney bought that. They were part of the first Bush administration, Papa Bush. And I remember interviewing Bush, and he understood that. The Cold War is over, or coming to an end. And, and then what happens? We get this terrorism, and it becomes an excuse for intervention, an excuse for and no one looks at, where does this terrorism come from? Was it suddenly some Muslims reread their scripture and decided to get angry with us? Where did Al-Qaeda come from? No serious questioning about that. Why did we decide to go into Afghanistan? And in the words of Zbigniew Brzezinski, by the way, someone I once hiked around the mountains of Maine by Seal Harbor with, and had a popover with, and my kids and his kids were hiking in the mountain together. He's a guy who tells Jimmy Carter, no, we have to go into Afghanistan. And in his words, he gave an interview for Novella Observateur many years later. He said, they went in before the Russians. And we have to, because there was a government in Kabul that was sympathetic to the Russians, we have to lure the Russians in, the Soviets into Afghanistan to give them their Vietnam. That's mischief making. We're going to have freedom fighters. We took these people. There weren't enough nutcases in Afghanistan. We had to recruit them from around the world, mostly in the Mideast. With the backing of Saudi Arabia, the backing of Pakistan, the backing of the United Arab Emirates, who are the three governments that recognize the Taliban. And we're going to go in there in Afghanistan. We're going to make it wonderful. And we're going to support these freedom fighters. And we end up making this great mess. And then even most recently, we have to go into Iraq, a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. Saddam Hussein wouldn't let al-Qaeda operate for a day in Iraq. He was sworn enemy of those people. Now we're doing the same thing in Syria with Assad. The Assad family was always against these religious fanatics. And then, we have to listen to people like McCain beating up on Obama. You're not doing enough for freedom in Syria. And then we have to overthrow the government of Libya under Gaddafi, that was defanged dictator who was making his own peace with the West. No, we got to get rid of him. Thank you, Hillary Clinton. And you go into Libya, and you got now one lunatic group after another competing, and you get ISIS. And there's no adults watching the store. There's no accountability. Why are you people creating all this mayhem? Where is the logic in your policy? Where are you making the world safer? These people are creating one situation of madness after another, and there's no accountability. They do it with the domestic economy. They do it with foreign policy, and they move on. They come in with a new administration.
Yeah,
they have supreme self-confidence.
Well,
that's to my mind the mind-boggling thing about this.
I agree, and I would like to just jump back momentarily to just to make clear that I wasn't meaning to cast this sort of like left-right dichotomy between Democrats and Republicans. I think by and large the distinction between those two parties is minimal at best. I think I'm thinking right, fascistic, left, socialistic, these sort of old sort of Marxist terms on the extremes, obviously. But one theme that's been running through the Soapbox since its very first episode is this idea that these lines of demarcation, political and ideological demarcation in America, whether it's left, right, Democrat, Republican, or whatever, have really sort of outlived their utility. And it's really more between the economic and political elites, those in power, and the rest of us, citizens, just living and working on a daily basis. And this might transition well to what I think we could use as a final sort of question. There is this debate going on right now on the left about the candidacy of Bernie Sanders, who is an independent Democratic socialist running in the Democratic primary for the presidential candidacy nomination for 2016. And there are those, including Chris Hedges, I think, who would say that, he's going to end up serving as sort of a sheepdog and funneling what otherwise would be useful and valuable energy on the left, funneling it back into the Democratic Party, which is a part of a broken system, an irreparable system. And then there are those that say, well, you need to work within the system to reform the system and then pull it back to a place of more sanity. I'm curious where you fall on that debate, if you think that there is hope to reform the system from within, or if we should be only organizing movements outside of the system, and if there is any sort of mutual incompatibility there or conflict, or can we do both at the same time? That's a big question. Go ahead, take it on.
Well, I think it's framed improperly. I think it's, first of all, it's an illusion to think, we'll reform the system or so forth. All we can do is be honest with ourselves and others. By we, I mean anybody who sees a wrong they want to redress, who wants to make things better, who wants to, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, who believes in social justice. Then our responsibility is to speak honestly and to be consistent. And that means, as you pointed out before, denounce leftist dictatorships with the same energy and strength that we denounce right-wing dictatorships, and leftist sellouts with the same energy that we denounce rightist sellouts, and liberal sellouts and conservative sellouts. I mean, our job is to bear honest witness, and by our job, I mean whether we're journalists or organizers or teachers or what have you, honesty. That's why our site is called Truth Dig. It's not that we own the truth or we even know what it is all the time, but you dig for it. It's like a archaeological model. You keep digging, you have some false starts, you try to get it. You know, I love Chris Hedges. I'm very proud that we are his main publisher, Truth Dig. We have other voices on the site. They are all fiercely independent and honest with themselves, honest with their readers, and that's what we should aim for. I think we sell out, we become careerists, we become corrupt when we exaggerate our ability to be insiders and reform. That doesn't mean don't be sensible. It means keep your listening ears open. Yes, be logical, be factually informed, try to reach people. Those are all valid. My problem with Bernie Sanders is I don't care whether he runs in the Democratic Party outside. I disagree with Chris Hedges on that. However, I think is what is he saying? You know, why isn't he criticizing Hillary Clinton more on her relation to the banks? Why isn't he attacking the legacy of the Clinton administration? He knows how rotten it was. Rotten. The reversal of the whole New Deal legislation, the Glass-Steagall, the development of the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, giving license to all these garbage securities that still haunt the world. I mean, one reason Greece is in trouble now is Goldman Sachs and others were able to sell them these junk bonds and, you know, sell the future revenue on their airport and their ports and everything else. So this horrible role, if Bernie Sanders were in the Democratic Party, really taking the fight to Hillary Clinton and challenging her, and then also being consistent on foreign policy. I think Sanders is a bit, what's the right word, one-sided on Israel, for example. Well, you can't discuss the Mideast, you can't discuss nuclear weapons, you can't discuss human rights if you're not going to be consistent about those things. It doesn't mean you have to demonize any one nation or group, but you have to be honest in your message. I don't hear him saying very much about that. I don't know if he's as strong on the surveillance state as even Rand Paul is. I don't know. But on the other hand, I don't want to be disrespectful of what Bernie Sanders has accomplished as a politician. I mean, this guy has played an incredible role throughout his political life, and I would bet on his not selling out in the primary. I would bet on his, at the end of the day, keeping up the good fight. However, I'll say about Bernie Sanders the same thing I would say about myself. I at this advanced age, have not sold out only because I have friends and family that will denounce me if I sell out. I have people. One thing politicians tend to do is surround them with yes people. They surround themselves with people, whether they're bankers or they're politicians or they're deans of universities. They surround themselves with people that tell them they're wonderful. I think the way to sanity, political sanity, personal sanity, is to surround yourself with people who are strong-willed and decent and solid. I mean, one of them is my wife, who's in the next room, who, if she overhears me say something in this interview that she thinks is contradictory or stupid or self-serving, will, trust me, not hesitate to point it out 10 times in the next hour. And so that's what keeps us sane, is to constantly be in progress and in self-evaluation. And what happens in the political process is that evaluation ends and you go for the lesser evil. Oh, the Republicans are so terrible, the Democrats are so wonderful, let's drink the Kool-Aid, happy times are here again, and you go down a path of madness. I have publicly criticized myself quite recently in this interview I've been doing for Real News Network, which are a very, very good group, and we have it on Truthdig. But I did a stupid thing once on a Nation cruise debating Ralph Nader, and I was putting him down for not being enthusiastic for Obama, and I think I was really wrong. And I think I was just getting full of myself there, and not learning enough from Nader and his rich history as really the greatest consumer advocate for the ordinary person that we've had maybe in our history. I mean, hard to think of another person who's championed the average person and their well-being as effectively in terms of their consumption and their rights as consumers as Ralph Nader. And there I was, quite arrogant on a Nation cruise, putting it to the guy, and I criticized myself for that. So the real issue to ask about Bernie Sanders is, will his habits up to now dominate, and his old friends and his old audience hold him accountable, or will he drink the Kool-Aid and move over? I bet on Bernie being Bernie and not selling out.
Well, I'm afraid we'll have to end there. My guest here on the Soapbox has been Robert Scheer. He's the author of They Know Everything About You, How Data Collection Corporations and Snooping Government Agencies Are Destroying Democracy. He's also the editor-in-chief at truthdig.com, great news website, and a professor of communications at the University of Southern California. Thank you very much for being here, Robert.